Welcome, those of you who are just joining. We're going to allow for all participants to join us here over the next couple of minutes, and then we'll get underway. Thanks to those of you who have joined. We will begin our discussion in just about a minute. Well, once again, thanks for joining, and we'll get underway. My name is Wade Crowfoot, and I serve as our California Natural Resources Secretary. And our agency has the tremendous privilege to support the work of our Department of Parks and Recreation, who we know as our State Parks team. Happy first annual State Parks Week. All of this week is an opportunity to celebrate our 279 state park units across the state and all of the remarkable things that happen in each of those parks. This discussion is part of a program that's happening across the state each day this week. And to find out more about the work of state parks and specifically State Parks Week, you can simply Google California State Parks and learn of all that we have going this week. Now, today, we are able to lift up what makes state parks special in California, and that is the partnership with all sorts of different groups that work with state parks to actually bring these parks to life, to bring folks into these parks, and to help ensure that their experience in these parks is remarkable. And so today I'm joined by Katherine Toy, who is our agency's first ever Deputy Secretary for Access. And Katherine actually comes from a nonprofit organization that partnered with our federal and state parks to expand access to Californians to those parks. Welcome, Katherine.
Thanks, Secretary Crowfoot. It's such a pleasure to be here today in celebration of State Parks Week and partnership, which is near and dear to my heart, as you say. You know, as our first Deputy Secretary for Access, working to create more equitable access to our parks and open spaces. My job is to provide that strategic roadmap about how we embed that into California. And I can tell you that while that roadmap isn't out yet, we know that one of the key tenets of that is going to be partnership. You know, I think that government works best when it's by the people, of the people, for the people. And we know that partnership with organizations, tribal and local governments of all sizes who are often closer to the ground and working in trusted relationships with community is such an important part of how we can work better and stronger together as a state. So so excited for today. And with that, can't wait to start us off.
Yeah, well, and I'll just mention that, you know, Governor Newsom has talked with us a lot about building a California for all. And one way we interpret that, you know, in the work of the agency is creating outdoors for all. And I know you're really developing that roadmap around what does building access for all Californians to our parks and outdoors mean. And so one current or thread of our discussion today will be partnerships that are really working to bring more Californians into these parks to enjoy them. So let's bring on our leader of state parks, Armando Quintero. You know, Armando has educated me that no two partnerships are actually the same, and that really the magic of collaboration between state parks and community partners is really understanding the different opportunities that each of these partnerships brings. So Armando, welcome. And maybe I'd ask you to just talk a little bit about what is the state of partnerships with state parks and how do you describe the work that's happening among your different parks and groups that are representing communities?
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to personally acknowledge the Save the Redwoods League, Parks California, and the California Parks Foundation for their leadership and encouragement in holding this first State Parks Week in the history of California state parks. You know, it's really important to acknowledge that over 100 years ago, the Semper Virens Club and the Save the Redwoods League created public awareness about saving coastal redwood forests, and they led the political efforts that resulted in the creation of the California State Park System. If it were not for those park partners, some parks may not have been created in time to protect the areas that you and I get to enjoy today. So that's foundational. And today, the evolution of park partners continues with hundreds of park partners supporting state parks across California through a diversity of partnerships. And there are local partnerships and statewide partnerships. And all Californians should have the opportunity to be in the out of doors. And it's lucky for state parks that we have so many partners. And I'd like to list just a few of those to give you a sense, because I know we're going to dive deep with our friends online. We have, for example, we have cooperating associations, concession donations, and proud partner agreements. And cooperating associations are nonprofits that are able to provide book sales and do fundraising and volunteering in partnership with local parks. We also have partnerships with qualified nonprofits for the operation and co-management of an entire park. For example, we have a co-management agreement with the Irvine Ranch Conservancy, and they work to protect the natural resources at Crystal Cove State Park by providing for the restoration, maintenance, and protection of the natural resources at Crystal Cove. There's an amazing variety. We also have partnerships with local government agencies, and they operate parks in partnership with us. For example, at the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, they manage lands at the Wilder Ranch State Park. And again, they do that in partnership with an agreement with state parks. And as you mentioned earlier, we also have agreements with federally recognized tribes. An example of this is State Parks Joint Powers Agreement for the management of Big Lagoon State Parks Visitor Center with the Yurok tribe. That's a place where it's the Yurok people that tell the stories of the Yurok people at that visitor center. It's a really exciting transition for parks as we expand our engagement with communities across California. We also have concessions partnerships, and these are the folks that come in and provide services like food and hotels and other services like renting equipment to visitors. So a variety of the experiences that you get to experience in parks are made possible through these park partners. Two other things that are really important, and that is the financial support that partners can provide for parks through things like donation agreements or proud partner agreements, excuse me. And an example of a proud partner agreement is the State Parks Partnership with Save the Redwoods League, which provides support to state parks with redwoods throughout the state. And that is an amazing partnership. And lastly, before we move on to the next speaker, Parks California is a brand new nonprofit, and we have the executive director on board with us today. And this is a unique partnership, and we have a statewide agreement with Parks California, which I know Kinley will be talking about. And this provides a new future avenue for how we will continue to expand partnerships and engagements with friends across California and communities across California. And I have to say, park partnerships, they help make state parks better. Thanks.
Thank you, Armando. And I've got a lot of questions for you. We're going to get you back involved in the group conversation after we have a chance to meet actually 6 leaders that are driving each unique partnerships with state parks at different parks. And you raised Parks California. And Catherine, that's a great segue to our first parks partnership leader we're going to be talking to today.
Great, thank you. It's my pleasure to give a formal introduction to Kinley Walsh Waller, the president and CEO of Parks California. And as Armando, Director Quintero said, you have a very unique organization with Parks California, born just, I suppose, a relative newcomer on the Parks partnership scene with being created in 2018. You have such a unique origin story. I'd love to have you share that with us. What is the origin story of Parks California, and how are you operating across the state?
Great. Thanks so much for having us. It's great to be here. And thanks, Wade. Thank you, Catherine and Armando, also for kicking this off. As you said, I'm Kinley, the president and CEO of Parks California. We're the first statutory partner to California State Parks, working statewide. We're just 3.5 years old, so we are the new one, the new kid on the block. And, we were born out of a need, right? We were born out of transformation times for state parks. And this new model was created where we would work from the inside out, setting annual joint priorities with state parks that focus on our shared core priority areas, right? Where we focus on equity and access, and we focus on resource stewardship. And then we work on knitting those together. So we're leveraging that whole concept of public-private partnerships to create solutions, to solve barriers to access, to create training opportunities for partners and state park employees, and to also model career pathways into good park jobs. So I'll just give you a few examples of what we've been working on over these first few years. We have 2 grants programs. One is called Route to Parks, and the other is Career Pathways. And they help us build relationships between state parks, team members on the ground, and communities also at that local level. We're capturing learnings and best practices, and then we help to shine a light on the amazing work that so many community organizations, some of whom are here today, are already doing for their communities and connecting those communities to parks. We do work to help amplify and then replicate their great work. And we're on our way there, right? We're still new and learning and experiencing all of this. And our partners include traditional friends groups who work sort of at that park level, but also these community organizations. Working statewide and meeting so many of all of you is absolutely amazing. And actually today, some of the people joining us to speak are really good friends to Parks California. So Rosie from the Yurok tribe sits on the Parks California board. Claire, who's with GGNPC, it's an organization that we're working really closely with out at Candlestick here in San Francisco. And Les from Outdoor Outreach, that organization's a 21-22 Route to Parks grantee. So I'd love to extend an invitation to all of you. We would love to hear from you. Reach out to us. Tell us what you're working on. We'd love to get to know you and your communities. And just this morning, we launched year 3 of our Route to Parks grant program. You can find more information on our website as well. So thank you so much for having us. Great to be here.
Kinley, thanks for all the work that you do. And I'll share with those who are tuning into this discussion that in the chat, our colleague Mark is providing online resources that tell a little bit more about the leaders who we're talking to, as well as their organizations. So there's more information on Kinley and Parks California. And I'm struck by just the remarkable network of organizations that are here to support state parks. And Armando mentioned just the diversity of organizations, and it's really remarkable. Kinley mentioned the leadership of the Yurok tribe, and so it's now my pleasure to introduce Rosie Claiborne, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer of the Yurok tribe. And as many of you know, the Yurok tribe is a sovereign government in what we now know of as Northern California and Humboldt County. And I have learned so much from partnering with leaders of the Yurok tribe on co-management of natural resources, the way that we approach our mission at the agency, and importantly, the potential for co-management of our lands and waters and our parks. So Rosie, really excited and thankful for your leadership and the leadership of your colleagues at the Yurok tribe. And I'd like to ask you to describe the leadership of the Yurok with state parks and what you've been able to accomplish together very recently.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, everybody. It's good to see everybody virtually. I began my journey about 20 years ago, working for the Yurok tribe when I was in high school. And, some of the first meetings I attended were with state park partners, and really starting those conversations and discussing what, co-management looks like, or what it looks like to work with a tribe on a government to government level. as sovereign nations. And, one of the things as we kind of evolve that conversation is there's really an acknowledgement that, every place that we step on in the state of California is native land. That's somebody's home. And, we have a very unique relationship with the parks. And, those are places that many of us have never, been removed from. We've never not cared about, we've never not wanted to manage. And so, up here in the North Coast District, we've been able to really take that partnership and take that idea of a leadership role from Indigenous voices and put that on the ground. So the Yurok tribe signed the first joint powers agreement with the state park for the first tribally operated visitor center in the state park system. And that was a huge feat for the tribe to do and for state parks, and kind of working together to see what that looks like. Out of that, I would say working with our tribal membership and descendants from Chapek, it's called Chapek Alketa, is the place where that visitor center is, and it's called Stone Lagoon now. But it's also a ceremonial site. It's a place where there are descendants that still, come from that place, still practice ceremony there. We were able to bring back a ceremony that hadn't been done in over 100 years. A few years ago. And so now we're building more of a base there and looking at what that co-management looks like. And, talking to our tribal membership, 95% of our tribal membership had never even been into that building, even though we all drive by it. And so, looking at what that means and creating a space where people feel comfortable, working with our superintendent up here, we've been able to get full-time interpreters for interpreting Yurok culture and Yurok history. Which is amazing. We've also worked at Sume State Park, which some of you may now recognized as the first state park to change its name back to an Indigenous name. It was named after a guy who was not so friendly to Yurok people and actually murdered a young boy of Yurok descendancy. And so now we're reclaiming that space by just changing the name. And one of the things that's really big in California is land acknowledgements and acknowledging whose land you're on. But, our partners at, the parks are taking that a step farther and really giving our tribes a voice and allowing us to have decision-making authority about what parks look like and bringing back that Indigenous knowledge back into the landscape. So we have so many great things that we're doing up here. We're working on Sume Village this summer. I have a crew that's going to come in and help, rebuild some of the houses through a contract with the state park, and really, feeling supported by our state park, but also supporting them and giving them our resources and feeling comfortable now to have a close enough relationship where we feel comfortable to give them cultural knowledge. And so, that to me, at the end of the day, really is about with the work that I do is building those relationships, from the top down all the way down to the staff that work in the field every day, and making sure that we're supporting them and they're supporting the goals of Indigenous tribes. And, I'm also really excited to be on the Parks California Board of Directors. And so, I look forward to continuing, the work that we're doing up here on the North Coast and partnering with Parks California, the state park statewide, and seeing how we can take what we've done up here in that partnership and help emulate that across the state, because it really is such a positive relationship and partnership that should be done everywhere.
Thanks, Rosie. And there's so much richness in what you spoke of in just a few short minutes, and the power of relationships and what that means to partnership. And I think that's something we could all round back to in our discussion later on. And also the ability for some partners to get together and look at what best practices look like across the state. So so many great nuggets of information in such a short time. Thank you. And now, I'd like to move us to introduce our next speaker, who is Claire Mooney, the Vice President of Park Places and Innovation at the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy. And you might hear National Parks in her title, but of course, Claire is a key leader in a very important partnership around Mount Tamalpais in Marin County. And that's the One Tam Collaborative, which includes 5 organizations, including the Parks Conservancy and state parks. So that's quite I think in many ways a somewhat rare thing to have five organizations, four land managers or agencies and a nonprofit partner working together for one geographic area. And so, Claire, I'd love for you to tell us more about how and why that sort of came about. Why five organizations working for one space?
Great question, Catherine. And yeah, thanks so much for including me today. So great to see this group of folks. Yeah, as Catherine explained, One TAM is our shorthand for the collaboration between the four agencies that are responsible for stewarding the resources and welcoming the visitors to Mount Tamalpais. And at the heart of that is Mount Tam State Park, but that also includes parklands managed by the National Park Service, most notably Muir Woods, but also the well-loved Stinson Beach. And then parklands managed by Marin County Parks, and then also the Marin Municipal Water District, which serves fresh drinking water to more than 200,000 residents in Marin. So a really interesting mix of agency partners responsible for stewarding one mountain there. When we first started working with state parks at Mount Tam State Park about 10 years ago, we were really focused on access and thinking about how do visitors perceive this mountain? And they really don't see jurisdictional boundaries, right? They know that a trail moves in and out of a state or a national park, but really they're just enjoying that hike. And similarly, when we think about wildlife migration, we know that they also don't see those boundaries. So those collaborations were really born in recognizing that we should manage our parks as people experience them. And then I think the addition of growing into a larger partnership to include Marin County Parks and to include Marin Water really also helped to think about what's threatening our parks today. And while we know that people and wildlife know no boundaries, we also know that weeds, fire, and climate impacts are going to know no boundaries as well. So when we think about the power of those four agencies plus their nonprofit partner coming together to really think about how we increase our resiliency of our mountain and how we continue to grow engagement and access in not just enjoying the mountain, but shaping its future is really needed when you have all of those agencies come together.
Absolutely. And I was just perusing your website via the link in the chat, and it said one mountain, one team. And I think one thing that strikes Catherine and I as we were talking about it is just the idea of coming together at a landscape scale. So, so often in government, we get caught up in our jurisdictions or our different silos. And with One TAM, it seems like you've broken down those silos and brought together all of the land stewards of the mountain and the watersheds coming off the mountain to really collectively plan and execute programs that really protect the resource, but also welcome people into the resource. What's your sense? I mean, has that been kind of a game changer for you all to think about sort of the mountain as a connected place, and just interested in that regional paradigm?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the ability for four agencies to come together and think about what the needs of the mountain are as a mountain, as a landscape, and then again, how people experience it. And then the ability to really take on more complex efforts in doing that do look at solutions at scale. So whether that's mapping the vegetation of the mountain county-wide, or we're in the final months of completing a look at how we think about forest resiliency across the mountain. So how do we plan for the future, recognizing the threat of fire, but also how we steward these resources? And then how do we build engagement around that mountain? So as we think about how all of those agencies come together and they can bring all of their relationships forward, they can bring all of their time and commitment to broadening the audiences and deepening the opportunities for engagement, which is really needed as we think about developing hard solutions to the climate crisis. Yeah.
Well, the climate crisis demands we move faster than we have in the past, and we move together, because there's not time or money to stay in our silos. So really inspirational, the work of One TAM, and thanks for joining us, Claire. We're going to move a few hundred miles to the south to Santa Barbara County. And I'll start by saying that our agency and state parks, we have not only an obligation to conserve our natural resources, but our cultural and historic resources. And we do that across the state and in certain places with key partners. One of those key partners is Ann Peterson, who's the executive director of the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation. Ann, welcome. And tell us a little bit about your organization's work with state parks in your part of California, and why it's important as we celebrate State Parks Week.
Great. Thank you for having me here. It's really exciting to be on this panel. The Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation was founded in 1963. And at the same time that our organization was founded to save the last remaining adobe of the Spanish fort built on Chumash land, founded in 1782, State Parks was looking for more historic resources to add to the park system. So from the very beginning, we've been kind of a public-private partnership to preserve and operate El Presidio de Santa Barbara State Historic Park. So El Cuartel was added as a monument, state monument in 1968, and then became El Presidio de Santa Barbara State Historic Park in 1970. And the Trust for Historic Preservation entered into an operating agreement in 1988. And we had a unique enabling legislation that allowed us to operate the park. So we're now in our second 20-year operating agreement. I've been with the organization for about 23 years now, and I've been the executive director for the last 6. And I moved to Santa Barbara to do my doctorate in the public history program at UCSB, which has great ties in the local community with this type of interpretation. So our organization has had a long relationship with UCSB as an interpretive partner. We've had many faculty members on our board. And that first generation, I think that the real project for the Presidio was to focus on a reconstruction, a partial reconstruction of the fort. And that's pretty much built out now. And I think the work of the current generation is to focus on interpretation and access, and kind of widening out that narrative from the Spanish colonial period to all of the other communities that settled in this neighborhood. And that includes the Chinese and the Japanese. So I've put in my background photo here, Jimmy's Oriental Gardens, which was a Chinese family-run restaurant for 2 generations. It's the most recent acquisition to El Presidio de Santa Barbara State Historic Park. And it's really representative, I think, of our new direction to be working more with all of the diverse communities in our area, the Chumash, Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Mexican Americans. We now have an Asian American affinity group. They're a group of community members who really put on their own programs in the park for about, I think we're in our 14th year of our Asian American film series and our Asian American Neighborhood Festival, all galvanized by this acquisition of Jimmy's Oriental Gardens. And these physical structures really give various different communities in Santa Barbara a place to attach memories and identities and sort of work out from. So we do a lot of work to preserve the structures within the park. We have an MOU with the city of Santa Barbara, and of course work very closely with State Parks. And we also do a lot of robust programming that's focused on access. So we just celebrated our first Community History Day, which was designed to help the community celebrate their various historical stories, both personal and neighborhood and ethnic. And so that was a wonderful event for us. And we're right now we are doing our summer camp with residents at the Housing Authority complexes, another great City of Santa Barbara partnership, also with State Parks. So we have a lot going on in the park. We've got 18 staff members working for the trust, and a robust board of 19 members representing, the board represents banking, architecture, construction, structural engineering, also various educators, librarians, people of very diverse backgrounds. Our staff includes archaeologists, several historians, educators, and the financial team and a great fundraising team. So together, we bring a lot of resources to the park. We also are doing a lot of work. We have a great DEI plan that we're in our second year of, to make sure that our staff and our board reflect the community that we're in, so that we can really promote and foster that access to get as many people into the park, even non-traditional park users, as possible.
Wow, Anne, thanks so much for sharing all that the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation is doing in the El Presidio de Santa Barbara and the community there. It's really, as somebody who comes both from an education background and a nonprofit background, I just love hearing what you're doing there. And I think the commitments, for access have so much to do about the stories we tell and we put out there. And so seeing how the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation has really helped and over the years to increase and open those stories to tell the history of who's there really does so much, I think, toward opening people who see their history in the state and feel seen and heard, really, by being able to see their histories there and have their histories and stories told. So, would love to continue to touch on that. And speaking about, I'm sure you have lots of students who come your way to El Presidio de Santa Barbara, and that education is something you share with them. And our next speaker, introducing Lesford Duncan, is from Outdoor Outreach in San Diego, California. And youth is something near and dear to your heart too, Les. I know we've had many great conversations about that, but Outdoor Outreach, your whole purpose is to connect youth to the transformative power of the outdoors. And, tell us why that's such a passion for you and something that's in your heart. And I know is a personal motivation of yours that has become a professional, how you spend your time and energies. And I had recently the great opportunity to meet several of your young people who've graduated from your youth leadership programs. So I'd love to learn more about how that has come about and what you're doing there with Outdoor Outreach to connect young people to our state parks.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary Toy and Secretary Crowfoot for inviting me to this conversation. To answer your question, I would say my passion and commitment to parks and the outdoors really was formed through state parks. In addition to being the Associate Executive Director for Outdoor Outreach, a San Diego-based nonprofit that connects youth to the outdoors, I'm also a mountaineer. I'm also an ultra marathon runner and kayaker. And that I'll never forget the formative experience standing at the top of Mount San Jacinto, my first peak, my first state park, and really one of those places where I personally experienced joy and healing through the powerful impact of nature. And I remember at that moment, standing at the top of Mount San Jacinto, looking out over the Inland Empire, just thinking, wow, I wish every person that I knew could have this exact experience, this exact moment at some point in their lives. And so it was at that point when I was living in San Bernardino, working in behavioral health, seeing the challenges, seeing the mental health challenges that children and youth experience and struggle with, that I said, how might the outdoors serve as a really incredible catalyst for experiencing health and well-being and resilience, and found out about Outdoor Outreach, the organization that I now work with. So just for some context, Outdoor Outreach, as I mentioned, is based on the ancestral lands of the Kumeyaay people, otherwise known as San Diego. And over the past 23 years, we've helped to connect youth to transformative experiences in the outdoors that increase their sense of belonging, that increases their connection to the land and to state parks and other natural resources in powerful ways that not only builds their own internal resilience, but also cultivates their leadership, their sense of advocacy. And I truly believe that the work that we're doing in collaboration with state parks, with the Natural Resources Agency, is cultivating the next generation of environmental leaders, the next more diverse coalition of environmental leaders. And so over our history, we're definitely no strangers to state parks. Over our 23-year history as an organization, we've been connecting over 18,000 youth to state parks and natural resources and green spaces through partnerships with California state parks, with the California Coastal Conservancy, through their Explore the Coast grant that has allowed us each year to provide opportunities for over 450 youth to experience state parks and beaches such as Silver Strand State Beach, kayaking and surfing there, or hiking and just playing on the beach at Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve. Also, as Kinley mentioned as well, our partnership through Parks California has allowed us each year to provide programs both at the coast as well as in other state parks for over 300 youth at Cuyamaca Rancho State Park, or at my first and favorite state park, Mount San Jacinto. We're excited for the future of our partnership with state parks, as well as we're kind of in the final iterations of developing a community access park partnership that will really allow us to work on an even more integrated in an even more integrated way with California state parks, allowing us to contribute to the park's forward vision of increasing diversity and representation in parks, reducing some of the barriers of permitting, and also cultivating workforce pipelines that allow youth to experience, in some cases, their first job opportunity in state parks as well. And then lastly, I would say and I would be remiss if I didn't say that we're super excited to be a grantee of the California State Parks Outdoor Equity Grant Program. We were fortunate to receive funding for 2 of our grant applications, specifically in the City Heights community of San Diego, as well as in the El Cajones County region of San Diego. And these are 2 communities that have experienced significant environmental injustices, as well as limited access to the outdoors and to state parks. And so through this partnership, we'll be able to over the next 4 years, introduce youth in most cases, to their first experiences in state parks, so that they also have that aha moment that will allow them to not only continue to appreciate state parks, but also to invite others and to meaningfully advocate for those spaces as well.
That is really, really exciting. And I know all of us find really inspirational the young people that you have a chance of working with. And Les, you've been great about elevating those folks in various dialogues and events that we've had over the last few years. So thanks for all of your work on that. We're going to bring everybody back to the discussion that we've introduced and talked to, and really join the and create a group discussion among all of us. For those who are tuning in, we have a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, and that's an opportunity for you to share comments or ask questions that Katherine and I will integrate into the discussion. Also, a reminder that our chat function is providing a lot of good links. And then this discussion is also being recorded and will be both on our State Parks website and our Natural Resources Agency website if this is something that you want to share with others in coming weeks. Maybe I'd start off with you, Armando, but really a question for the entire group. You know, we're joined by about 150 people here today, with probably a whole lot many more people who will watch the recording, some of whom may want to be creating partnerships like those they've heard about today. And I want to ask you all, what do you see as critical parts or critical components of the partnerships that you've been involved in? In other words, if we're making a recipe and the recipe is partnerships, what are those have to have ingredients? Maybe turn it to you, Armando.
Sure. Thank you for that question. I mean, I have a sort of a heartfelt perspective that California is everybody's California. And by going to a local park, I think folks can begin to connect with a park that really feels like their own backyard. I have all my life volunteered in parks on various projects and still do. Where I live, there's a handful of state parks, and I've gone and worked on trails, and it feels good. It's like taking care of your own yard. And so I think that given the diversity of talents in humanity, virtually all the talents that are out there can probably be applied in a park setting. An organization in a local park needs folks who can do the books. They need folks that can have the knowledge to help with things like historic restoration, with native plants restoration and projects like that. And of course, look at, with Rosie and the Yurok people, there are people with traditional knowledge. And it's so interesting to me that a lot of the knowledge that can be really valuable in parks is not book knowledge, it's cultural knowledge. And there are other skills and talents. And I would also say that there are perspectives from all ages that can be valuable in parks. Oftentimes, well, I'll share this very quickly. When I took my 4th grade daughter's class for a hike on Mount Tam, to do a natural history hike. After getting home, my daughter called me from the bathroom and she said, "Dad, we are not flushing our toilets with that beautiful water, are we?" A fourth grader. And so the perspective that children can bring to us can change the way we act in our lives. And that kid did that for me. So I think that's what I would say is these parks are yours. They're a part of your home. They're a part of where you live, and bring who you are to the parks, and it'll be a great joy for you and actually for the public.
Kinley, I saw that you took yourself off mute. What do you see as critical components or ingredients of successful partnerships?
Yeah, thanks. I'll be careful not to do that again, by the way. So look, I think what we're learning is the power of the local community representatives, right? So we have this unique ability to work at the sort of leadership Sacramento level with state parks, with leadership on the ground, at the division chief level, at the district superintendent level. So we've spent a lot of time in 3.5 years getting to know parks across the state very purposefully, but we've also spent as much time getting to know communities. And we're really getting to know them through their most trusted organizations. And they take on different approaches, different profiles, but really learning from them as we start to then merge the community organization and that local state parks team together for us has been the shift. And then being able to take learnings from that and look at how it can be not replicated, but scaled and contextualized, localized in other parts of the state. So again, really digging down to being on the ground with community groups or local tribes and listening and learning from them, but making sure they are walking away with personal relationships with their park staff on the ground.
That local leadership, local connection, so important. Others, critical ingredients of the partnerships that you're involved in. Claire.
Yeah, I feel like I just want to say communicate, communicate, communicate. I think there's a really basic skills, but sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that, and I think about the 4 agencies we work with, the National Park Service bringing a federal lens, a national lens to what it means to all of these parks across the United States, down to Marin Water, really focused on delivering that clean water to Armando's daughter's toilet. Money ebbs and flows, mission and purpose ebb and flow, leadership ebbs and flows. So the ability to just be really honest about what are your opportunities, what are your constraints, what do you need, how do you leverage resources? I think just continuing to have really open and honest, clear paths of communication have been critical to make sure that we can be dynamic in how we meet the needs of a project or a community or a particular moment in time. So I'd say just continuing to communicate as a really solid means of trust.
Excellent. Les, I want to put you on the spot because I know it hasn't always been easy for community groups like Outdoor Outreach to actually get out into the parks and feel welcome, like you can bring a bunch of young people out there. But it sounds like it's improved and continues to improve. What are the sort of the elements of the good welcoming partnership versus the alternative?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for groups like Outdoor Outreach and community-based organizations across the state, an essential part of our work is helping youth to feel welcome in state parks and natural spaces in ways that really invite them to come back and to visit on their own. And so I think that happens at multiple levels. It happens, directly through our partnerships with folks that are working on the ground. I think about Chris Peregrine down here at Silver Strand, Gina Moran, and many of the folks that we can reach out directly to make it easy for us to program and to partner with state parks. But then it also comes from, and the tone is really set by leadership as well. And so we've been incredibly grateful for both state parks and CNRA's leadership. Each of the 3 of you have really taken the time to sit down to meet with our youth, both here in San Diego as well as in Sacramento, in ways that have incredibly inspired youth to look at new opportunities that they could explore. Director Quintero, I think about the time that you connected with Maria. I believe she introduced you for the California State Parks Foundation Policy Forum, and then you took the time to follow up with her afterwards. And that has really helped to inform her career. Most recently, Deputy Secretary Toy met with a group of our youth, and Mindy came back incredibly inspired, saying, wow, there's an Asian woman in leadership here at the Natural Resources Agency, and that has really changed my perspective on the route that I can go. And then Secretary Crowfoot, I think your first meeting with a community partner was with Tatiana Butte, in addition to several other youth that were in the room, talking about how do we make access possible and how do we create funding streams that also support outdoor equity work. Well, Tatiana has since gone on, I think that was back in 2019. She's since gone on to Cal Berkeley, where she's studying public policy. And I actually just got an email from her this morning. She's applying and asking for a letter of recommendation to Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy. And why each of those examples are relevant is because, as I mentioned before, a huge part of our work is cultivating that next generation of environmental stewards. And each of those young leaders that I mentioned are taking incredible leadership in different realms of natural resources, outdoor equity, and environmental justice. And that comes from that collective commitment by the State Parks Department and by the California Natural Resources Agency. So a huge part of that partnership is communication, as was said before, and is direct engagement with community.
Yeah, I'll ask the next question, then I'll turn it over to you, Catherine. For Ann and Rosie, our friend and longtime parks leader, Richard Rojas, asks a question, which is, how important is it to you and the partnerships that you've led to have the support and a positive relationship of your park district superintendent and the leadership of state parks there? Is that a nice to have? Is that a have to have? Interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, I think for me, we have Victor Belayets up here as our state park superintendent. And, I see everybody nodding their head. Yeah. I don't think what we've done up here would have been accomplishable without Victor. I say that because of his willingness to listen, like we're all talking about, but also his willingness to take action. I've done government to government meetings, like I said, for, 20 plus years. And, a lot of times, you get that like, we'll look into it, or, we'll do stuff. And Victor doesn't do that. Victor says yes. And let me figure out how to do it. And, one of the things that we always like to point out for all of the great work we've done up here, we've had to change no law. We've had to change no policy. Like, these are all existing mechanisms that are here to really elevate, Native voices and elevate tribes within the state park system. And we're just learning how to exercise that. So, for me, I always say everybody needs a Victor, and then they need people like Victor's staff up here who are on the ground and being able to really have the support they need in order to work with tribes. So for me, I think the superintendent and of course, Director Quintero, his leadership has been, so valuable, and Secretary Crowfoot the same way, that's trickling down. I think that there's, the ground level and the superintendents and people are starting to feel more supported to make the changes that we should be making.
Powerful. Ann.
I love that Rich Rojas asked that question, because Rich was our district superintendent and he's one of my favorites. And he actually served on our board for several years. So great shout out to Rich. And we've been so blessed with wonderful district superintendents, Rich Roselle, Steve Trainer, who also served on our board. Victor Belayets was in our district for a short period of time. And now shout out to Greg Martin, our current district superintendent, who's on this call. And, I think that with every new district superintendent, there's a real rapport building period, where you sort of need to grow that trust and demonstrate, how are we going to work together? And I hope I don't embarrass Greg, but he's off camera. But I think what we've tried to do with Greg is really prioritize his requests. Like, yes, we always have a lot going on, but if Greg asks me for something, it's because he's trying to help us. And we're going to, I put out red alert to the staff. We need to find this document ASAP because Greg's working for us out there. And so we go get it. I also think a lot about, Greg's point of view, managing this district with all of these different parks and so many things going on. And, when he's able to devote a robust amount of time to help us with, my latest request is, hey, our local downtown marketing association wants to park their golf cart in our parking lot in exchange for a free and, membership. And I need a license agreement. How does that rank on your priority list? And Greg says, we'll figure it out. And it's that kind of relationship where it's sort of the yes and kind of approach, and let's get it done together. And meanwhile, when I'm asking Greg about golf carts, I know there are shark attacks and fires in his parks that he's trying to manage, but he'll take the time to talk to me. So I can't say I guess it's crucial, but honestly, I've had such positive experiences with district superintendents who really understand working with nonprofit partners that I might take it for granted a little bit, but it's very, of course, very important.
I totally hear you. And I began my relationship with state parks as an executive director for a nonprofit partnered at Angel Island State Park. And that relationship with the superintendent makes all the difference. So, and it's amazing superintendents who are out there in the state park system. I'm going to pivot a little bit to a question that I have heard in reference in some of you saying earlier in this speaker series hour, which is around workforce and workforce development. And you all have organizations and your Rosie Tribal government who have, folks that are working in there, especially young people who are coming up, being a part of your programs. And you have internships. I know, Claire, you've got lots of internships or have had over the years at the Parks Conservancy, and Les, certainly your youth development program and internships. And how are, what are the ways in which, that works well as funneling up into careers with maybe state parks? And what might you see as opportunities for further connection? And maybe, Les, I'll turf that to you on first.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I would say, workforce development, I truly believe will work best when it comes from community, right? So I think it's no secret that across natural resources agencies and land management agencies across the country, one of the greatest challenges, or a few of the greatest challenges, are the increasingly aging workforce. And workforce that's nearing retirement, and the lack of diversity that exists across land management workforces across the country. And so Outdoor Outreach has leaned into that need, that challenge, in a really big way to create pipelines where we're introducing diverse communities to career opportunities in natural resource and land management settings. So to date, we've partnered with the National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service, and now through the Outdoor Equity Grant Program, we'll be developing internships for state parks as well that will help that will allow youth to experience their first career opportunity in the outdoors. I think one of the next, or kind of frontier challenges that we look at is, and then what, right? Like, how do we create hiring pipelines or hiring preferences into California state parks and other natural resources agencies that will allow youth to transition from an internship opportunity into a lifelong career in natural resources or natural resource management. And so that's the opportunity and the challenge that we look at, kind of looking ahead in this work.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know, Director Quintero, if you had some thoughts about working on the other side of that, hiring young people who've come from some of these fabulous partnership places.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Actually, state parks, along with the other departments in the resources agency, have combined efforts to create a career center that's at the resources building in Sacramento. And with the team at state parks, that group is now called the Workforce Planning and Recruitment Office. And you can go online and just type in California State Parks recruitment, and you can sign up immediately for getting on a mailing list. And these folks really are there to help and guide folks in terms of seeing what kinds of opportunities there are in the Natural Resources Agency and state parks. And I'm really excited about the impact that this group is going to have, because it's the pipe. You know, they're building the pipe that people can enter with support, and not just being pointed to how to apply, but actually being assisted in that process. So I'd really encourage anybody who's interested to type in California State Parks recruitment.
Yeah. And I want to make sure to get to some of the questions that are in our Q&A here. And one of them is from Kathleen Lee, and Director Quintero, I'll keep you on the line for that one, which is, what advice do we have for small organizations to develop and build relationships with park headquarters staff, especially in the partnership office?
Well, the partnerships office, as an earlier question points out, we are seeking a director for that partnerships office. And we're excited about getting that person in place, because there's actually additional advances that we want to make with that group. But I would say to the person who's asking the question right now that going to a local park, and just as was mentioned by Anne and by Rosie, and talking to the staff there is probably the best first way to find out what parks need. And then that can help guide the questions to the partnerships office in terms of what kind of agreement might be most helpful and a best match for that person with those interests.
Yeah, and now, and for some of you on the screen who represent organizations within, of course, working with parks, any tips for your end to getting started out?
I'm happy to just say, I'll echo Claire's statement: communicate, communicate, communicate.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, you know, what we've learned and the people we've met who work for state parks, whether they're sitting in Sacramento, like most of the partnerships team and leadership team, or out in the field, these are amazing people who love what they do and want to help find the answers. And every person I've met at state parks values partnerships and are open to innovation. And for us, that's been the most incredible part of starting this new organization and new model for public-private partnerships, is really leveraging the desire and the awareness that there are new ways of doing things.
Yeah, and I'll double down on your observation. I mean, I am so excited that we have a state parks department and a leadership that is so open-minded. I think we all recognize that while there are some incredible partnerships, there are many more potential partnerships that we can realize. And there are many ways to improve and expand the existing partnerships that we have. So for all of you who are tuning in, please know we value your creative ideas, your suggestions, even your criticism around how we can continue to strengthen partnerships, because we have real challenges, whether it's climate change or growing inequities, and our state parks can play a central role and are playing a central role in addressing those challenges. But we got to do that together. So I want to do a quick speed round and go through each of you who have joined us for maybe a final sentence or two on what your hope is for the future of partnerships with state parks. Either it can be super specific as it relates to your partnership, or just kind of a broad vision. But again, what is your hope or aspiration for partnerships with state parks? And we'll go in the order that we introduced you. So starting with Kinley, and then Armando, you can finish off.
I think it's just my hope and dream continues to be just helping to be that connector between community and state parks, building those relationships and creating these relevant, trusting, welcoming experiences.
Thank you. Thanks for all you do, Kinley. Over to you, Rosie.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's, expanding on the relationship that we have in our district up here for Yurok specific, but also looking statewide now that I'm a part of Parks California, and trying to find those partnerships for the state park and tribes throughout the state.
Such great potential. Claire.
Yeah, I think it's just continuing to foster a community of creativity. I think about how much our partnership with state parks has changed since we started 10 years ago, when it was more maybe about the nuts and bolts of getting a project up and running. And now how it is about engaging broader communities, or adding a depth of science, or making sure that there's youth pathways. So I think continuing to make sure that we're really being creative and thinking about how we broaden the opportunity, not just continue to fill the same holes or fall into habits of the same kinds of partnership.
Powerful. Anne.
I think I'm most excited about the synergy I'm seeing with the work that we're doing with inclusion and access, and the values at the headquarters level of state parks. And for a small local nonprofit, that's really exciting to be able to plug into. It's something that we can lean on and say we're part of something bigger. So I think the Reexamining Our Past initiative, for example, is really inspiring. And I've been able to have members of the team working on that speak to our board with the message, we're all in this together. We're doing the work together as a much bigger team than just our local community. So I think there's a lot of exciting potential there.
Thank you. Les.
Yeah, and I would say, and I know this is not an in-depth policy conversation, but I would say, one of the things I most look forward to is a particular piece of legislation, Assembly Bill 2975, that will allow for even deeper partnerships with state parks, and will develop that community access park partnership agreement for community-based organizations across the state, as well as I look forward to continuing to connect, to be at the table as a community-based organization, to be able to regularly pick up the phone and help to inform some of the processes that State Parks is developing. So I'm looking forward to working with, to continuing to work with a phenomenal leadership team at CNRA and State Parks.
Thanks so much. Armando.
I mean, I look at the screen and I think of all the people that I've seen in parks, and I really want us to be a welcoming place. Parks are a place where we welcome the wisdom of the world from all ages. And everything that you're seeing on the park has come from people in parks who had the ideas and were impacted by their experiences in those parks. And I'm excited about the evolution of humanity really bringing the wisdom to the parks.
Well, Katherine, I'm going to turn to you for the last word. In part, the governor recruited you based on your experience as a nonprofit leader, partnering with public park systems to help us understand how we can work together across the state with groups like those that have joined us today to expand access to parks and outdoors. So what in a few sentences are you hoping that we can accomplish together in the future?
Well, if the conversation today is any indication, we have so much to look forward to and to be positive about. I think we at the agency and state parks are certainly in a position now where all the conversations I'm excited to be a part of around equitable access and the real commitment that is there from the governor, from you as the secretary, from all of our work together. I think that moving forward, for us to be able to say, what does it mean to have true access belonging in our parks and public spaces? That is our future, and that is California for all. The work that has to be done. Yes, we've got some work to do, things that we can do to make this go further and better. But I am just absolutely heartened by the work of partners across the state. And so to anyone out there who's thinking, do we have a place at the table, a place to belong? You absolutely do. And these folks on the screen are certainly testimony to that power and that promise. So this is California for all, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take all of us to make our outdoor spaces places for everyone, where we all feel a part of California and a part of belonging. So with that, this panel here today, really been excited to be in conversation with all of you and look forward to what we can continue to do together for those on the screen and for those who've tuned in and are listening.
Well, onward all together. Thanks to you panelists, and thanks for those folks who have tuned in here on Zoom today. We greatly appreciate all the work you do across the state. And once again, happy State Parks Week in California. Take care and have a great rest of your week.